Charles I of England was King of England, Scotland and Ireland from the 27th March 1625 until his execution in 1649. He is seen as a complete failure as a king. He's probably in the top 5 worst kings of England if you ask the population. But the truth is, we don't really teach the civil wars at school or at university, and we miss the nuances around his reign and around his rulership. We also misunderstand his relationship with Henrietta Maria, Princess of France and Queen of England, who had played a part in English history, and we completely dismiss her as this villain queen who influenced her husband and who didn't have England's best interest at heart, which I really don't think is true. In this What If in History video, I would like to discuss with you one point in history. What if Charles I had managed to flee to France in 1647-1648 at his last attempt to be reunited with his wife? What would have happened? And actually here, we're going to discuss a complex relationship between France and England, but not just that. We're going to look into Charles I's motivations and his loving and caring relationship with Henrietta Maria. Charles was born into the House of Stuarts as a second son of King James VI of Scotland, but after his father inherited the English throne in 1603, he moved to England, where he spent much of the rest of his life. He became heir apparent to the kingdoms of England, Scotland and Ireland in 1612 upon the death of his elder brother, Henry Frederick, Prince of Wales. Again here, I feel like we have a theme of men who are not meant to be kings. Like, even Henry VIII was a second son, Henry II of France was a second son, Charles I is the second son. And somehow they always lose their elder brother and became king of their respective kingdoms. And I think it's very interesting and very important to mention it, because we have to understand that at first when they were raised, there was no pressure of being the next king. And then when it fell down upon them, I think we tend to forget the pressure it was for them to then step up as heir apparent, but also to step up with the ideals of kings. So here, the education is going to play a huge part. And at that time, in the 17th century, there's the rise of, absolute divine rights, which means that the kings are appointed by God on the throne, and really their authority should not be discussed or challenged. And Charles I is going to be raised like this. And it's something we should not forget, because it plays a huge part in the way he's going to want to rule. At first, he was promised to the Infanta Maria Anna of Spain, but it didn't work out. After that, he married Henrietta Maria of France, a Catholic princess, the daughter of Henry IV of France, the one who converted to Catholicism to be able to rule, the sister of Louis XIII of France, the aunt of the Sun King, Louis XIV of France. So I'm trying to put here into context this marriage. It is a new dynasty, the Bourbon dynasty, and it is fragile, but it's also with very important figures, and it is a very strong Catholic country. Henrietta Maria, though her father was at first Protestant but then converted to Catholicism, is extremely Catholic. In England, we know that the religion is very important. There was lots of problems. There was the Gunpowder Plot in 1605. There's lots of things about religion, around religion, where Catholics are persecuted. The marriage is not really welcomed well in England, probably because of the fear of having a Catholic queen by the side of a Protestant king, and what kind of influence she's going to have on him. And to understand this what if scenario that I'm proposing to you today, we need to understand the real history and how it could have played out. After his succession in 1625, Charles started having trouble already with the English Parliament, who tried to curb his royal prerogative, who tried to curb his power. And here again, he was very much influenced by Henrietta Maria, who came from an absolute divine rights country, and his own beliefs in how he should be ruling. He had lots of troubles with his subject and the way he wanted to increase taxes without parliamentary consent. And there was this idea that he might become a tyrant, an absolute monarch who didn't listen to his people. These problems were increasing with the problem with the fact that religion was different in Scotland and in England and in Ireland. And so Charles was not seen as a unifier, and it was really unclear what he was trying to do to make the whole kingdoms unify together and unite around him. There's a very great book on Charles I, The White King, Charles I, Traitor, Murderer and Martyr by Leanda de Lisle. And I could not recommend this enough because she looks at him with understanding and compassion, and she does take you through the twists and turns of the English Civil War. So it is kind of a very interesting take on Charles I, and I think it is worth for you to have a look at this book and to read it and to maybe change your mind on Charles I. What I'm saying here is that we can't always look at things black and white. Charles I was definitely not perfect, but he was not the monster that everyone was saying he was. And he did listen to the parliament. And if you want to know the truth, Elizabeth didn't rule as well with the parliament for some period of time during her reign. And she was never called a tyrant at the time. And I feel like here there was this misunderstanding, but there were also these great figures, political figures around him that were creating more problems, like Buckingham, who was really hated and who had lots of influence on Charles himself. So here we really have this kind of differences and this kind of problems and animosity, and people saw probably Charles as kind of a weak king who was trying to be strong and who was trying to impose his own beliefs in terms of rulership, and they disagreed with him. I don't think he was a weak king. I think he was doing what everyone else was doing at the time in Europe. All these tensions are going to create the English and Scottish civil wars. And by 1642, Charles is going to fight the armies of the English and Scottish parliaments. And this is going to be very confusing, and it's going to divide the country between royalists and, parliamentarians. And this is one of the darkest time in English or British history. Even British didn't exist as such at the time because there was not the Act of Union in 1707. But yet these countries were really against and trying to depose a king. But were they really trying to do that when we see all the support that Charles I actually had? He was fighting with his own armies, with his own men, and lots of people, royalist people, did back him up. Now if we talk about Henrietta Maria, by 1644, she, with her husband, they decided that it would be better for her to flee and to go back to France. At that time, in 1644, she already had lost her brother Louis XIII, who died in 1643, and the one who was the new king was only a young boy, Louis XIV. Louis XIV could not rule, he was too young, so his mother, Anne of Austria, became regent alongside another very important cardinal who was very much in charge of France at the time, Jules Mazarin. Henrietta Maria was received in France. Of course, she's a princess of France, she's a daughter of France. She was welcomed back to France. And that is where I want you to understand why I chose to do this What If in History video. Because the fact that the love of his life, Charles I's love of his life, was in France, made that he tried to join her. When it's become clear that in 1645 he's losing the battles in the English Civil War, he's gonna want to find a way to go back to France with his wife. In 1645, Charles I suffered a big defeat against the parliamentarian New Model Army, and he fled north from his base at Oxford. He tried to have negotiations with the Scottish, he tried to find compromises, but it never worked. And many times he got captured and he tried to escape. He fled to the Isle of Wight, but he was again captured. But in 1648, he tried again to flee to France, and this was unsuccessful. His plan was to climb out of his bedroom window. While there were bars on the window, Charles believed he would have been able to squeeze between them, which he didn't manage. He was very much mistaken, and he got stuck between two bars and struggled to free himself. Though he tried to keep negotiating, this was the end of it for him. The fact that he tried to escape again, and the fact that he tried to go to France. Obviously, it was his plan. And that's why I'm saying, what if Charles I had managed at that time to flee to France? But first, I want us to realize, I just want to share with you some things, because I think we see them as historical characters. It's so easy to vilify a king that can be seen as a tyrant, to vilify a French princess who became an English queen because she's Catholic. And I just want you to remember that these people lived, these people felt, these people loved. And I have the letters of Henrietta Maria in this book, and all these letters are in French. So you're probably not gonna, not all of you are gonna be able to read them. But these letters all start between Henrietta Maria and Charles I as "Mon cher cœur," my dear heart, "Mon tendre cœur," my tender heart, my sweet heart. These are political letters because she discusses how she can help him to join her, but they are also personal letters. They're love letters. I get very emotional about them because they're so personal. And the first time when I read them, I felt like I should not be reading them. I felt like I was stepping into something that was not meant for me. And she tried to appeal to Mazarin for help, and she tried to find a way to help her husband. I think that if Charles had managed to flee to France around 1645 and not, or 46, but before 48, and I'm going to explain to you why, I think he would have had a good chance to have more support from France. And what I mean by that is the fact that France at that time was not super stable, because, when you have a regent, when you have a small boy as a king, you're not very stable. However, from 1648 until 1653, there were massive rebellions in France, La Fronde, which were a series of civil disturbances. The government financial difficulties were once more at the root of the trouble. In the first few years of the regency, a variety of expedients were tried to raise additional revenue for the war with Spain. So France was already caught up in a war. And so the support they could give, really, Charles and Henrietta Maria, was very slim. But at least if he had fled in 1546, he would have been reunited with his wife. So what if Charles I had managed to flee to France? Unfortunately, I think because of the climate in Europe, the fact that France had external problems with war in Spain, problems inside France, I don't think it's realistic that they would have managed to give an army to Charles to go back to England and get his throne back. Not in 1648 and 1653 even. But at least he would have been with his family, and yes, I think he would have never stopped to try to get his throne back. I think it's very difficult to know if he would have had a sort of restoration in 1660, because Charles I had such a bad reputation in England and Scotland. I think the most possible scenario, if I'm honest with you, is that he would have probably accepted to be with his wife and to live like that, at peace in another country, but to put his son back on the throne, Charles II, in 1660. And he would have probably abdicated for him, for peace. Because, when you look at Charles I, and that's my own interpretation, and you're more than welcome to disagree with me, but I don't see him as a power-hungry, completely devoted of compassion or common sense. I think he was a very compassionate man, truly in love with his wife. I think it would have been very difficult for him to get back his throne to put himself back on it, and I don't think he would have had so much support, but Charles II had a better chance to restore the monarchy like he did in 1660. So I think in many ways he would have had a better life if he had managed to flee to France, but I think the fear that French would have sent troops and an army is completely ridiculous, because at the time, as I said, they had no money to do so. They were at war with Spain, and after that they had civil rebellions in their own country, so they had no way, the time or energy or the money, the finances, to help Charles I to get his throne back. I really hope you enjoyed that video on Charles I. I mean, it's such a controversial topic, it's something we don't talk enough about. Please leave your comments down below. I want to hear from you. I really do appreciate hearing from you and your thoughts. So thank you so much. Don't be afraid of disagreeing with me. It's totally fine. I stand by my choices for my different reasons and the fact that I've read so much on that topic. But I'm happy to discuss anything you want to discuss. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you even more for your support. Bye!